Hello everybody, welcome to this demo webinar of ATLAS.ti. I am Ricardo Contreras. I direct the Training and Partnership Development Division of ATLAS.ti. I am based in Corvallis, Oregon in the US. If you need to communicate with us after this presentation, please write to training@atlas.ti.com or call us at 1-866-880-0231, that is for the US and Canada. You will find on our website under support a list of phone numbers from different countries. Today I will be talking about qualitative visualizations with ATLAS.ti Desktop, exploring the meanings behind relationships. This webinar has been pre-recorded, and I did that so that you can ask questions as you are watching the presentation. And as you ask those questions, I will be able to answer them right away. The presentation will take about 60 minutes. There are a few slides that I will be showing at the beginning, and then I will go ahead and start demonstrating how to work with those visualizations in ATLAS.ti 8 for Windows. Those of you who are ATLAS.ti Mac users, please know that everything that I'm showing you with Windows can be done with the Mac as well. And I will be highlighting the differences between both. You can watch video tutorials that I have created on networks for ATLAS.ti Windows and Mac as well. The microphones will remain muted to avoid echo and background noise, and this webinar is being recorded, and you are going to receive a message about 3 hours after the webinar is over with the video. If you do not see that message in your inbox, please check the spam folder. So what do we mean by qualitative visualizations with ATLAS.ti? Well, we refer to them as networks, and they are graphical representations of the linkages that we establish between different concepts and units of meanings and pieces of the discourse as we analyze our data. There is the author Susanne Friese, who wrote the book Qualitative Data Analysis with ATLAS.ti, who states that an analysis project with ATLAS.ti is a system of linkages. And I would add that those linkages can be visualized graphically. That is what networks are, the graphical visualization of the linkages that we create as we work in our analysis. They provide us a systemic view showing how different items and pieces of the project and pieces of data relate to each other. They allow us to see the whole, and therefore they are helpful in analyzing the data. They show us relationships and not frequencies or numerical indicators. I would say that networks allow us to move from looking at the tree to looking at the forest, right? So from individual units to relationships, to connections. Networks, they display linkages that we establish. That's what I said before. Now, those linkages are of two kinds, two types. First, what we call first order links, and those are semantic connections that we establish as part of our analysis between codes and between quotations in an effort to represent our understanding of the data. So we say, for example, I have a code called apple, and I have a code called fruit. Well, according to my understanding of the data, how do I think that apples relate to fruits? I will say the apple is a fruit. So say that is what we call a relation, and that is your decision, that is your interpretation. ATLAS.ti cannot know that the apple is a fruit. Okay? So what you see on the left side is a code at the center connected to a number of different codes around it through a relation that is called perceive. So I am saying that the codes around that code that is at the center are related to family one child through the relation perceive. That is my understanding. And on the right side, I see that there are segments from the text, where we call in ATLAS.ti quotations, that in my understanding relate with each other through a contradictory relationship as well as through a supporting relationship. So I say, for example, what Mary is saying in quotation 3209 is contradicting what Susan is saying in quotation 513. And what Mary is saying in quotation 3160 is also contradicting what the other person is saying in quotation 513. So you see, I am trying to build what I refer to as an argumentation map, showing how pieces of the discourse relate to each other. But that is my interpretation. Then we have these networks that show another kind of linkage, not semantic anymore, not first order anymore, but what we know rather as second order links. These are the linkages that we create as we connect in the normal process of analysis different elements of the project. For example, I have interviews conducted with people who completed their high school education. So what I will do in a regular analysis project with the program, I will create a document group called high school education or education high school. And I will insert into that document group all of those interviews with people who completed the high school education. Well, that organization in a document group can be visualized graphically as well. And that is what I am showing to you on the left side, the screenshot on the left. At the center below, I have a document, an interview. And I wonder, well, what is this person talking about? So I visualize that interview with the codes that I have used, or I have used in that particular document. So that is what the visualization at the center is showing. And then on the right side, I have a single code, family do not want children, and I am visualizing all of the things that have been said in regards to that concept. In other words, all of the quotations that have been linked to that code. So what is common about these visualizations is that the lines connecting different elements, they do not have names, while the visualizations of linkages of a first order, you see the lines do have names, and I will define them. You also have networks that include both kinds of linkages, which is what I'm showing you here. And now let's go ahead and start working with networks. First of all, let me say that there are two ways in which you can start the process of visualizing individual items of the project, such as individual documents, quotations, and codes, in a network view. The first way is by creating a new network under Home, New Entities, New Network. And now you are going to name it. So for example, I'm going to say the network of a given document, document number 2. Create. So now I'm going to go to my list of documents. I will find document number 2, and I will drag and drop it into this network editor. So that is the first way that you have to start visualizing a given item, and by item I mean, for example, a given document, document group, quotation or code, for you to visualize that as a system of relations. So let's close this down. The second way is that you simply right-click on a given item, for example, a given document, and select the option Open Network. You can do that with everything. A single document, a single document group, a single quotation, a single code, etc. And you can also do that with collection of items. For example, you select a set of documents, as I will do now, and I will visualize them all in a network. You see that? Let me start by visualizing a given document group. Document group, select or open the list of document groups that I have. And now let me find one of them, the one that says Education High School, and I will right click on it, and I am going to open network, the network of that individual document group. So this is a way of displaying the documents that belong to a group. If you like this display because perhaps will enrich your report writing, well, then you can use it, right? You can create an output of it on top, export bitmap, and select the file that you want to use and save, and then you insert that file into your report writing, into your PowerPoints or your Word documents. All right, so there you have it. Now let me insert into this network that shows a given document group with its members. Let me insert another document group. I will insert the one that says Effects of Parenting Negative. Drag and drop. What this tells you is which ones of these interviewees have completed their high school, and at the same time they say that the effects of parenting are negative, right? And I see 3 of these individuals who meet those conditions. Now, if you take a look on top, you're going to see a number of different individual icons. I cannot go with you through each one of these because I don't think that would be very practical. Instead, I would like to ask you to take a look at the manual section on networks that goes over each one of the items of the menu. But let me highlight a few of them. Most importantly, I would say that if you go to View on top, you can select frequency, and that applies to codes and quotations, as we're going to see later. But you can also select comments. And the comments, you can write comments on your documents, comments on your document groups, comments on your quotations, on your codes, etc. And comments are, as you may know, brief descriptions of the nature of that individual element. So for example, what is Education High School? This group includes all of the survey responses from people that have completed their high school education, right? What is the comment for document number 14? Well, this comes from the survey. That is what it says. And you can also select preview, but you have to be careful because this will show you, in this case, the preview of the document, that is the text of the document. That may be too much, right? You don't have space for that. if we were showing quotations, the preview would show the entire text of the quotation. So you have to be careful with that. And I am going to unselect that, and rather let me go back to where it says network above and select layout. So ATLAS.ti provides 11 automated layouts that allow you to visualize your work in different ways. Now, each one has its own explanation. You just place the cursor on the option and you will read the explanation. Now, some of these explanations are rather complicated, I would say, but if you want, just take the time to understand the concepts behind them. Or you can simply experiment. One, the other, in this case it did not change. Circular single cycle. I do not like that one. Organic, that could be okay. Radial, I think this is very clear. It clearly shows that documents 9, 28, and 21, they are shared between these two groups, education, high school, and effects of parenting negative. So that is clearly visualized there. So I like this one for this case. Let's change routing. Routing will allow you to customize the way the lines will look. Orthogonal, polyline, organic, straight, which is the same of organic in this case. Let's say polyline. And now you will save the network, education. So in fact, education, network, high school, and effects parenting negative. And there you have it, right? So now you close it, and to access it, you look at the list of networks in the navigator, the left side panel, and I will select the one I just created, which is this one here. Let's now take a look at individual quotations in network so that we can see the different connections that we have created in relation to those quotations. So let's go to the list of documents on the left side. I'm going to click on the triangle next to the first document that shows all of the quotations in that document. Let me open one of them, and I see the entire document in the workspace, and there I have choices. One choice is to activate the network of a given quotation by simply right-clicking on the quotation bar in the document, right-click, open network. So this shows us the quotation coded with two codes and the document from where it comes. I don't want to have the node representing the document, therefore I will right-click on it, remove from network. So it tells me that that quotation has to do with scientific evidence and children less happiness. In other words, using a non-ATLAS.ti language, what this really tells us is that what this study participant is saying in this quotation, it has to do with two topics. One, scientific evidence, and children are less happiness. So that is what this has to do with. So you have that representation here. And now you have a number of choices. Let's take a look at the options above. Under View, you can select Preview. So now you see the entire quotation. You adjust this. If it's too much, you have to be careful, right? So you will determine how much text do you want to see, and then you can scroll down to see the entire text. That is if you want to see the preview. Otherwise, you will only see the name of it, and the name is given by the first set of characters of the quotation. You can always rename them, but that is another subject. So you can either see the name of it or you can see the preview of it, right? All right, what else can you do here? Well, you may start adding more elements into this. So you may say, I wonder, right? I wonder what else is being said in regards to children are less happiness. If this is being said about that, I wonder what else is being said, right? So this could be something logical to ask. And now we will insert into this network other quotations that are linked to this particular code. Now, there are two procedures, two ways of doing that. One is by right-clicking on that code, add neighbors, add quotations. Now, this will add all of the quotations linked to that code. In other words, everything said about children less happiness. If I have 100, well, all 100 will be brought into the network. So that will produce a very kind of saturated network and not very useful, I would say. So I would have to be careful with how much or which quotations do I bring on board. And how do I do that? I think that it would be useful to see the frequencies. Under View, Show Frequencies. That tells me that the code children less happiness is connected to 18 quotations. And this one, number 19, is one of those 18. I do not want to bring them all into the network. That would be too much. Instead, what I want to do, I want to bring into this visualization only those quotations that I consider to be powerful enough, strong enough, good illustrations of the idea behind children are less happiness. And how do I do to selectively insert those quotations into these networks, those strong, powerful quotations? Well, there are different ways, and I will show you one of them, and you will have to practice on your own and figure out the other ways just by practicing. But let me show you one way that I think that is practical enough. Let's open under Home the Quotation Manager. So in the Quotation Manager, I see on the left side the codes, and on the right side the quotations. If I click on one of those codes, the one that is precisely the one I'm talking about, that is children less happiness, I will see on the right side the quotations that are linked to that particular code. Number 19 is the one that is already in the network. So what should I do here? How do I select the ones that I want to insert? Well, I think it's a good idea to go one by one, right? So you look at number 17. Do you like it? You read it below, so you have an idea about it. And I would say, why not writing on a piece of paper? You can still use paper, pen and paper in analysis. And I will say, well, maybe I like number 22. That is a very, very simple one, small, short, and powerful. Children do not bring happiness. In fact, more often they seem to bring unhappiness. Well, that is very questionable, I would say, but let's not go into that. Then we see number 23. I do not like it. There is also evidence that the strains associated with parenthood are not limited to the period during which children are physically and economically dependent. And let's say that I do like that one, so I will write this down on my notebook. That is number 2.6. Let me go to another document, number 3. No, it's too long. These studies have not shown that having children makes you unhappy. Okay, good. I am gonna bring this on board also, number 3.16. And let me just go to another one. You see, in real life, right, in your real research, you will be systematic. You will go one by one and read each one of them and make the decision whether or not that quotation is powerful enough, is strong enough, illustrates well enough the concept that you want to illustrate and show in that visualization. Let me go to number 415, number 433. Well, I do not want to insert that one because it says I'm probably one of the very few who will admit that I regret having kids. Well, I do not agree with that. And 463. Well, let's just say that it's 463, okay? Let's just say that. It doesn't matter whether or not I, the presenter, agree with that statement. That is besides the point. So what I will do is, once I have selected the ones I really like, I will place the quotation manager either on the side of the network or below. New tab group, you click on the triangle next to the X first of all, new tab group, and let's keep it down. And now I will just go ahead and start selecting. So the first one I want to bring on board, I said was 2, right? So let me do it like this, 2, drag and drop. The next one that I have in my list is 2.6, drag and drop. And the next one is 463, drag and drop. There you have it. You see that? I will close this window, the quotation manager, and now I will click on network above, layout. Clearly 463, it's huge. I cannot have this long icon, so I have to make it smaller. And there you have it, right? You started with 1.9. I said that has to do with scientific evidence and also children-less happiness. And then I asked myself, all right, now what are other people saying about that concept, children-less happiness? And I decided to bring on board a few quotations that I consider to be good illustrations of what people are saying in regards to that. Now, clearly here I have to play around with the layouts, okay? I don't like that layout. This is much better. This is much, much better. You see that? Orthogonal tree doesn't change. Radial. No, not really. I think that, let me stay with perpendicular. That is perfectly fine. I don't see the need of anything else. All right, so that is what I did. I started with looking at 1.9 within its context, and now I moved beyond that, and now I am ready to insert this into my writing and write something like this. Well, what one of the study participants said in 1.9 has to do with, or refers to, the notions of scientific evidence and children-less happiness. And as I explored the concept of children-less happiness, I found that 2 other study participants had something meaningful to say or interesting to say about that concept, right? And then you explain with what those quotations 2.6, 2.2, and 4.63 say. And then you move beyond that, right? And start writing in your memos about what is it that what those other participants are saying about children-less happiness. What is it that has in common with what was said in quotation 1.9. So you move from the a view of the quotation within its context. Double click on that quotation node, then you read the quotation content, but you can also click where it says show in document. So you move from that contextual view of the quotation within its document towards what I like to refer to as a systemic view, in which the quotation is shown connected to other elements. So we are moving towards more of a systemic, more of a holistic view. And if you agree with me that an ultimate purpose of qualitative data analysis is to build holistic representations of the realities that we are studying, then these visualizations will help us do that, because they show connections. And that is why they are qualitative visualizations, because the emphasis is on relationships, not frequencies, not numerical indicators. So now let me save this network, save above, and I will give a name to it. And let me say relationships quotation 1.9. Create. You can write a description of that, edit network comment, insert the date and the time, and start writing. This network shows that what participant 1 said in quotation 1.9 has to do with scientific evidence and the notion that that children bring less happiness, right? You can put in parentheses, that is code children less happiness, right? So it has to do with scientific service. Okay. In addition, the network also shows what 2 other study participants said about the idea that children bring less happiness, and so on. And you describe, really what you are doing here is you're describing what you see in this particular network. And then I will save this and close it. So now let me start making these semantic connections, establishing first order links between codes in order to represent my understanding of how these concepts that are represented in the form of codes, how they relate to each other in configuring my understanding of the whole. That is the main purpose of all of this, right? How do I understand this phenomenon that I am studying? Now, establishing these semantic linkages between codes is not something that you really have to do. You can go through the entire analysis process without ever building these semantic linkages between codes. Just like I would say that if you were not using software, you can go through the entire analysis process without ever starting to draw on a piece of paper relationships, right, between different codes to represent your understanding of how they connect to each other. Well, that is really optional, and you will decide whether or not that will, or doing so, will contribute in any ways to your analysis. So let's do this. I am going to open the code manager, which is located under home, and there I see the list of my codes and I see the list of code groups. I'm going to open the code group effects of parenting, which contains codes that represent both positive and negative effects on parenting. You know, this is the data, right? These are the concepts that I have developed through my analysis. So I look at these codes and I start wondering, well, how do I think that these codes relate to each other? Now, I could say, how do I think that the study participants, right, think that these codes relate to each other? So this is my interpretation of the point of view of study participants. So I start thinking about that and I say, well, it seems to me that clearly we have two categories of effects of parenting. One is negative effects and the other one is positive effects. So I will proceed to drag and drop the code effects negative, drag and drop it on top of the code effects of parenting and say, it seems to me that these study participants view that effects negative is really part of the effects of parenting. So negative effects is part of effects of parenting, and these are the relations that ATLAS.ti provides. There are a few here that were created by the researcher, but the ones that the software provides well, first of all, contradicts, is a, associated with, is a cause of, is part of, is property of, and no name. No name is a relation that you can use as a wildcard for anything. But it's not that useful because you can create your own relations, right? So I will say that negative effects or effect negative is part of effects of parenting. And then I will say that effects positive, drag and drop on top of effects of parenting, and say the same. Effects positive is part of effects of parenting. So just as if I was drawing on a piece of paper, I am starting to draw lines connecting one code to the other and saying how those codes relate to each other in my understanding, right? So now I am gonna visualize all of this graphically. I select the codes and go to where it says Open Network, or right-click Open Network. So here we have the linkages that I have already created, positive and negative. And below that, all of the other codes that I have not yet connected to this code. So what else do we have? Well, it seems to me that it can safely place all of those codes that have to do with negative effects, and it's easy for me to see which they are because they are colored orange and they have all been named with a prefix, right? A prefix that precisely represents the idea that they are negative effects. I select them all. On top, link, drag and drop over effects negative, and select what I think that is the relation that best applies. I would say that they are all negative effects. So is A, they are all negative effects. You see that? Okay. And I will also say that these are positive effects. So I will select them, link effects is a they are. And there is another code, effects parenting letting go. Well, you know, I haven't yet decided whether this should be labeled as positive or negative. It's just a condition. It's just a condition of parenting. Is perhaps, I could say, a property of parenting. So let's say in a very preliminary way, in an exploratory way, I will say that this code relates to effects of parenting by saying that it is a property of. It is a property of. All right, so here I have, I do not think this is a right visualization. Let's see, 3. That is much better, right? Here I have a visualization that is showing my understanding of how these concepts relate to each other. Now, why do I do this? And how is it that I came to this? Let me first answer the second question. How is it that I came to this? If you take an iterative approach to qualitative data analysis, whereby you are always intertwining, working at the data level with organization, analysis, and interpretation, then when you stop and start thinking about how one code relates to the other, well, you will know that already because you have been examining that throughout the process. And in fact, you have been writing in your memos throughout the process. So you could even say that this graphical representation is nothing more than an illustration or a representation of what you already know. Because through writing, you have come to the same conclusions, that these codes relate to each other in these ways. So you can see this as nothing more than, first of all, a representation of what you already know. But you should also see this as an opportunity for new insights, an opportunity to create new knowledge, because it could very well be that you had not yet thought about these relationships, right? As you have been writing throughout the process, maybe you did not yet think about these relationships. Well, in this case, when you stop and start making the connections, that constitutes an opportunity for you to produce new knowledge, for you to produce or to have new insights. Okay, so that is, I think, something that needs to be said. This network can be both a reflection of what you already know, but it could also be an opportunity for you to get to know new things, right? So that is, I guess, a good way to put it. Now, this network in particular looks a lot like a taxonomic structure, a tree structure, although it's a property of does not fit on that. And then I can go beyond this. I could say, well, and how do these codes relate with each other? Well, you could say effects positive is really contradicting. Effects negative, contradiction. You see that? And then you keep on. You can keep on inserting or linking, not inserting, but linking these codes with each other through these relations as much as you feel that it's necessary for you to develop a good understanding of the data, because that is the ultimate purpose, right? To develop a good understanding of the data. So don't do this just because you can do it. Do this only if you feel that this will contribute to your understanding. Another application of networks is that you can use them for coding. But only when the codes are related to each other through what we call transitive relations. That is part of, is a, and is a cause of. but you can create your own relations and assign to them the transit formative property. Now, networks that use these relations, they are the ones that resemble or look like tree structures or taxonomic structures. So when you are building this tree structure or taxonomic structures, then you can use them for coding. So let me tell you what I mean by that. I will now open the Code Manager under Home, Codes, and I will place the network right below that Code Manager. And let me see the network, and the code that is on top is effects of parenting. So what I want to do is I want to open the tree structure of that code, and that tree structure will show me that code, and below it will show me the two codes that are directly below that code, negative and positive effects, and there under each one of those two you are going to see the other codes that are listed right below. So I will go to effects of parenting. Let me look for it. I found it, and I will click on code tree, and now I will see on the left side in the navigator that it says code tree, a new list, right next to explore, and there is a triangle next to that. That is the code that is on top of the tree. I click on that triangle and I see two codes, effects negative, effect positive, which are precisely the two codes are under effects of parenting on the tree. And if I click on the triangle next to effects negative, I will see the codes that are under that code in the tree, right? Oops, I am on the wrong side. That is the right side. And then if I look at the codes that are under effects positive, I will see the three codes that are under that in the tree. All right. So let me use that for coding. I am going to open a document. So I am now in this document and I am reading it, and I find that there is a segment that has to do with less fun as a negative effect. So I select that and I go to negative. So I open the triangle next to negative and I look for the code that I'm looking for, which is effects negative, less fun, and I will drag and drop it onto the quotation. Now, by coding with that code, I am only coding with that one. I am not coding with the ones that are above it in the network, in the tree, okay? So you see that code is now linked to that quotation. However, that quotation is not coded with negative, effects negative, and effects of parenting, only with the code that I selected. And then if I go to the text that follows, that is a different view, it's more positive. So I will go to my effects positive, and it talks about fulfillment. So I will select from there. So that is an alternative way of coding, alternative to coding from the entire code list. Let's take a look now at what we call hyperlinks. That is the semantic linkages that you create, that you establish between quotations, either within a document or across documents. This is something that you do if you want to describe how is it that you see that units of the discourse relate to each other. For example, what Mary is saying in a particular quotation, you think, you see that contradicts what Susan is saying in another quotation. So you can do this as a way of illustrating with a small sample of quotations. You normally work with small samples to illustrate how you see that people are building their arguments. This is a way of working with the discourse. So I placed in a network a number of quotations that I had already selected. So I already looked at them, I read the text, and I now want to start establishing linkages between these quotations, because they all have to do with two ideas. One, personal responsibility, and personal relationships. So I want to see how they relate to each other. Now, I cannot read each one of these because that would take too much time. But let's assume that I know already how to connect them. So all you do is you will, in fact, I will say that this one relates to 3160 because that one is contradicting what is meant by 3160. And this other three that I have above, they also relate to 3160 through a contradictory relationship. So you go to the top where it says link and then drop the lines on 3160 and select the relation that you think best applies. Now I know that this is contradict, so I will select contradicts. And then all of these other, I have already read them, therefore I know what I want to do. They relate to 3160 in the sense that they support what is being said in that quotation. So I will go to link and drop on top of 3160 and select supports. So there you have it. So this is a visualization of how I see that units of the discourse, that is quotations, relate to each other. And by doing that, I am trying to map what I see as the way that these people are building their arguments. Therefore, I like to refer to these networks as argumentation maps. But you may have a different opinion about that. But that is how I like to see them, as argumentation maps, and you always work with them in a focused way. You will not connect all quotations with each other through these hyperlinks. No, you're going to look at concepts. So in this case, I looked at two concepts, personal responsibility and relationships, and then I went deep into those two concepts and I read those quotations linked to those concepts, and then I started to wonder, okay, how do this connect with each other? And that is how I ended up making these linkages. And now I can take this to a paper and start explaining. There is a very clear contradiction that is represented in what one of the participants said, and that is quotation 3160, and what was said by another participant. And this contradiction, you could say, is exemplified, is illustrated in the following, right? And then you import into your writing this entire network, or you can simply remove what you don't really want to have in the writing, remove from network, and then you just take a screenshot of this and then insert this into the writing, because this is what illustrates this contradiction, right? So it's just a way of going deeper into explaining how units of the discourse relate to each other. Very interesting. Now you can create this linkages also in documents. So I'm going to do something like, without paying too much attention, you may say, and this, drag and drop it on top of another quotation, explains that. Okay, and furthermore, you can place two documents side by side, and one relates to the other because one is criticizing the other. And then you will visualize this graphically by right-clicking on the relation. You see the relation there, 416 criticizes, opening network, and now you are going to see the actual hyperlink represented graphically. So that is another way, okay? All right. Well, this is all. Thank you very much for being here today. I hope that I was able to give you a good overview of how to work with networks in ATLAS.ti. I am sure that you are going to have questions. If you do, please write to me and I would be happy to answer them. And if you want a demonstration for your team, for you and your team, well, you may request a demonstration and I would be happy to do that. Just write to us as well. For more information and more kind of learning more about this, please take a look at the manual and at the collection of video tutorials that we have on our website under Learning. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.